You leave one crumb on the counter overnight, and by morning there's a thin little line of ants marching straight to it like they got a group text. Everybody calls them sugar ants. Everybody assumes they just want something sweet, and everybody's first move is the same. Squish a few with a finger and wipe the rest away, convinced the problem is solved for good. Stick around, because almost everything you just assumed in that sentence is wrong. And by the end of this video, you're going to look at that little trail on your counter completely differently. Let's start with lie number 1, and it's the biggest one of all, the name itself. Sugar ant. Here's the problem. A real sugar ant already exists, and it's not the one in your kitchen. The actual sugar ant, officially called the banded sugar ant, is a completely different species found in Australia, a big ant with an orange band around its body, named that way because of its obsession with sweet food. It's not even in the same genus as the tiny brown ant marching across your counter right now. What you're actually looking at, almost anywhere else in the world, especially across the United States, is something called the odorous house ant, a small dark brown to black ant, barely 1/10 of an inch long, one of the most common ants found inside homes on the entire continent. Same nickname got borrowed and slapped onto a totally different insect on the other side of the planet, and that mix-up alone has been feeding half the myths people believe about this ant for decades. Two completely different species, two completely different continents, one recycled nickname, and almost nobody realizes it. Which brings us to lie number 2. They only want sugar. That one sounds reasonable, until you actually look at what these ants bring home. Yes, they love sweet stuff, especially something called honeydew, a sugary liquid produced by aphids as they feed on plants. And here's a detail most people never learn. These ants don't just steal honeydew, they farm it. They'll actually guard aphids on a plant like tiny livestock, chasing off ladybugs and other predators, moving the aphids to better spots on the plant, and gently tapping them with their antennae to trigger the release of that sweet liquid on demand. It's basically ranching, just on a scale small enough to fit on a single rose bush. That's already stranger than anything you pictured before you started this video. But sugar is only half the diet. These ants are just as interested in protein. Dead insects, grease left on a stovetop, meat scraps, pretty much anything with fat or protein in it becomes fair game, especially in spring when a colony is raising new larvae that need real nutrition to grow, not just quick energy. Colonies will actually shift their preference throughout the year, leaning harder into protein when they're raising young and switching back toward sugar once the larvae are grown. So the next time you see them ignoring your sugar bowl and heading straight for a greasy pan instead, that's not confusing behavior. That's exactly what they're built to do, and exactly what the season is telling them to look for. Now here's lie number 3, and this is the one almost everyone gets wrong without even realizing it. Squishing one with your finger doesn't just end that one ant story quietly. The moment you crush it, it releases a chemical compound called a methyl ketone. And here's the part that should really change how you react next time. That smell isn't random. It's often described as smelling like rotten coconut, or oddly enough, blue cheese. And scientists who actually studied this compared the smell directly using lab equipment. They found the exact same class of chemical shows up in the ants, in blue cheese, and strangely enough, in coconut once it starts to rot and grows a particular type of mold. Fresh coconut on its own doesn't smell like this at all. But that smell isn't just a defense mechanism to gross you out. For this species, it doubles as an alarm signal. When you crush one on the trail, you're not eliminating a problem. You're broadcasting a chemical alert that pulls even more workers toward that exact spot to investigate what happened. So squishing a few ants on your counter can genuinely backfire. turning a small trail into a bigger one within the hour, all because the smell you were trying to get rid of was actually calling in reinforcements the entire time. That brings us to lie number 4. The idea that a sudden invasion means they smelled your leftovers from a mile away. In reality, these ants don't have permanent deep nests the way a lot of other ants do. They build shallow nests under stones, mulch, or logs outside, and they move constantly, sometimes relocating the entire nest more than a dozen times in a single season. So when heavy rain floods their shallow outdoor nest, or when a stretch of extreme heat dries everything out completely, the colony doesn't sit there and wait it out. It picks up and moves, and your kitchen, with its steady temperature and hidden moisture behind the sink or dishwasher, suddenly looks like the safest real estate around. That sudden line of ants on your counter after a storm was never really about your leftovers. It was about the weather outside making your walls look like the driest, safest option nearby. Here's lie number 5, maybe the most important one if you've ever tried to actually get rid of these things. Most people picture one colony, one nest, one queen hiding somewhere behind a wall. Reality is a lot messier than that. These ants can have dozens of queens spread across multiple nests, sometimes tucked into wall voids, sometimes under a stone outside, sometimes packed into insulation near a heater. All of those nests can belong to the exact same colony, working together, sharing workers, acting like one enormous spread-out household instead of a single ant hill. And it gets stranger. Most ant colonies are territorial, aggressive toward any ants from a different nest, even their own species. These ants often aren't. Neighboring nests from the same population frequently show almost no aggression toward each other at all, which lets them merge, expand, and blend into what researchers call a supercolony, sometimes made up of tens of thousands of workers spread across an entire yard or neighborhood, all functioning as one interconnected system. That leads directly into lie number 6. The idea that spraying them fixes the problem. In a lot of cases, it does the opposite. When this colony senses a threat in one location, whether that's a chemical spray or serious disturbance, it doesn't just sit there and die out. It splits. Groups of workers and queens will pick up and relocate to a new spot entirely, a process researchers call budding. Spray one visible trail, and instead of shutting the colony down, you can accidentally scatter it into several new colonies hiding somewhere else in your house. This is exactly why these ants have a reputation for being nearly impossible to get rid of with a spray bottle. The only method that actually works long-term relies on slow-acting bait, something worker ants carry back to the nest themselves and unknowingly share with the queens, taking down the whole system from the inside instead of just the ants you can see. Last one, lie number 7. The idea that none of this actually matters because they're completely harmless anyway. In one sense, that's true. They don't bite, they don't sting, and they won't chew through your walls the way a carpenter ant would. But harmless doesn't mean consequence-free. A colony marching through your kitchen is still walking across every surface it touches, crawling over counters, into open food containers, across dishes left in the sink, carrying whatever bacteria it picked up along the way. The real cost isn't structural damage or a painful bite. It's contamination, quiet, constant, and easy to overlook simply because nothing about the ant itself looks dangerous. One more thing before we wrap this up, because it's honestly one of the wildest facts about this species. These ants are absurdly hard to put down individually too. Researchers have documented workers with crushed or injured bodies continuing to move around and work almost normally. Queens have been found still laying eggs even after suffering serious physical damage. And in lab conditions, Some queens have survived over 2 months with no food and no water at all. Whatever you think you know about how fragile a tiny ant should be, this species quietly breaks that assumption too. So here's what we actually know. After clearing up every one of those lies, the name is borrowed from a completely different Australian species. The diet is not just sugar, it's protein too. Squishing one can make your problem worse instead of better. Sudden invasions are usually about weather, not hunger. What looks like a single trail is often one small piece of a much bigger, cooperating network. Spraying that trail might just scatter the whole thing into new hiding spots around your home. And harmless was never the same thing as no consequences. None of this means you're stuck living with them forever. It just means the approach almost everyone uses, panic, squish, spray, repeat, was built entirely on a name and a set of assumptions that were never actually true. If you actually want them gone, the pattern that keeps showing up again and again is simple. Sweet liquid bait placed along the trail, left alone long enough for workers to carry it back and share it through the whole network. Patience over panic, basically every single time. So next time you spot that thin little line crossing your kitchen counter, maybe don't reach straight for your finger. Take a second, actually look at where they're heading, and think about how much of what you assumed about them turns out to be completely wrong. If this changed the way you look at the ants in your kitchen, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who've been believing the same myths their whole life. Let me know in the comments, did you already know the truth about sugar ants? Or did this completely wreck what you thought you knew? Subscribe if you want more videos exposing the truth behind the most common bugs people misunderstand every single day. See you in the next one.